All right, Paul Hudrick's here, a little inside the Sixers. We had a lot of Sixers questions earlier in the show, and we will answer those now. I didn't get to them yet. I was waiting for Paul. He knows more than me. I didn't realize, when you're in the backdrop there for the video, can you see me or can you just hear me?
Both. I see and hear you.
Okay, because I never know, like when the person's like grayed out back there, before I actually put you into the stream, can you see what we're doing?
Oh, yeah.
Now that I know that, that helps. I always was wondering, like, can the guy see what I'm doing? Can you hear what's going on? Like, did you hear Sal and I?
I didn't hear that because I wasn't on that early. But
Gotcha.
no, when you were going right before you went to break, absolutely. As soon as I logged on, I heard it all.
All right, let me ask you this. Did you take away anything from Wednesday night?
Not much. Kyrie Irving's very good, and he's going to be very difficult to guard if the Sixers have to play him in a series. And they have two other guys that are going to be really difficult to guard. I think everything that we like. I don't think we know anything deeper than what we already knew. We knew they were going to be they're going to be a very difficult team to stop offensively. They're going to score a ton of points. We also know that they don't have a great matchup for Joel Embiid. DeAndre Jordan, I thought, actually got away with a couple of things early, and then as the refs kind of started giving Embiid a couple calls, that matchup tilted heavily toward Embiid. I thought the end of the game was just a sloppy mess. As Embiid put it, I thought he put it. It was just weird. It's a tough situation when you're up 20, you take your foot off the gas. Starters thought they were done for the night. It's not an excuse. It's just the reality of the situation. You see that you're up 22, you think that's the end of the night. So I'm with Doc Rivers in that I don't take a ton from that. And I agree with Doc that the transition stuff, that's the weird thing to me. I don't know why this team is so terrible with transition defense when they are one of the best defensive teams in the NBA, but they just allow so many easy points. It's so bizarre. I know that one interesting comment that Doc made is that DeAndre Jordan actually said to him, you guys are great in the half court, so we're going to have to score quick.
Right.
So that seems to kind of be the book on the Sixers is if you have to get into the half court with them, you're going to be in trouble. So try to get out quick. So that's probably a big part of it. But the Sixers have to figure out a way to combat that because you can't keep letting up all these easy baskets.
So I know you're saying I'm not taking a lot from the back. They were sitting out. I agree with you. However, did the Nets kind of ass backwards themselves into, hey, we might have found something here? They were trapping with Claxton hard, sending another guard. And I know Embiid may not have been like fully like there, but they were really trapping him almost immediately, and he was really having trouble getting, they had 3 or 4 turnovers on this, I thought they did a good job. And I know Aldridge retiring yesterday. It's a sad story, but that might have helped them out. Claxton's probably a better situation for them than having to play Aldridge.
Yeah, I mean, when I saw them sign, Aldridge and Blake Griffin, my first thought was, okay, now it looks like Nick Claxton's kind of out because I thought he had been doing such a great job for them, and he has. With that said, the only reason I don't take a ton from it is they showed it at the end of the game with 5 minutes left or however many minutes were left. In the next time they would see the Nets would be in a 7-game series. There are ways to combat what the Nets did.
Yeah.
It's just really hard to do that in 5 minutes when the game's over. And it's just the energy to maintain that level of energy that those bench guys played with is not sustainable, right, especially for some of the better players. And I get what you're saying, but also too, I think the strategy, there wasn't a good strategy. It was basically Ben was walking the ball up. His man was immediately basically double teaming Embiid immediately, and then Ben was throwing it to him in the post. Over the course of a series, that's not going to be what happens. Right. They're going to they'll figure some things out. They'll run some different things. They'll get Embiid on the move, which they've done a very good job of this year, where they haven't allowed teams to double team as well because they've gotten them on the move, whether it's, dribble handoffs, whether it's pick and rolls and pick and pops, whatever it is. So I just think over the course of a series, they would find ways to combat that. That's just my opinion.
No, you're right. And I would say so much so that Brooklyn was getting back in the game. They never went back to Kyrie. They just said, let's just keep with what we're doing. So even they were kind of like, look, this is kind of an odd situation, boom. But what's the message from Brooklyn from you on why, we don't care?
Because they think what's more important to them is their guys getting rest than getting the number 1 seed, which I think you can make an argument either way, Mike. I think you could certainly say, of course, having Kevin Durant with fresh legs and as close to full health as you can, Same with James Harden, same with Kyrie Irving. Having those guys up and running, and in Philadelphia, we've experienced it the last couple of years with Joel Embiid. The thing that you're trading off, though, is that continuity. I get that they're three immensely talented players, and I get that you're hoping that the skill level, the talent level, and how good they are will trump anything above, chemistry or whatever. And it's a fair thing to bet on. But at the same time, like, you can't, like, we've watched the Sixers this year. We watched what they looked like earlier this year, and we watched what they've looked like now. What they've looked like in stretches without Joel Embiid. Of course, they're not going to win anything without Joel Embiid, but the idea that they have played better as a team, their help defense, their rotation defense is so much better. Even Mike, from the first half to the second half in that Brooklyn game, Kyrie Irving got whatever the hell he wanted in the first half. The second half, they made some adjustments. Joel was better help-wise. I thought Ben was better, kind of giving him a little bit more space. And, if he's gonna hit whatever 10 threes, then you kind of live with that, and you kind of hope he doesn't just murder you, in that mid-range game and get into the basket. So I thought they made adjustments, and I thought their chemistry as a team defensively helped them in that game, and I think it's helped them in other games. So I already think Brooklyn's help defense and their rotations aren't very good. So if they don't have time to develop that, I'm curious to see what that's going to look like in the playoffs. Now they're going to have a first-round series, of course, to get through some of those games, but we'll see how it kind of plays out in the long stretch.
I'll tell you, it'll be interesting. And obviously they have no answer for Embiid. But if they defend him the way they did there, that kind of negates this theory of, hey, just sagging off of Simmons, because you're going to have to use that guy there, which means somebody's going to be open a lot. So the theory of what the Sixers want is Embiid to dominate, and then Tobias Harris, Seth Curry, or Danny Green to be hitting shots. That's really their path to wanting to win, correct?
Absolutely, and I think you saw.
Notice I didn't say Ben Simmons scoring.
No, and I don't think they need that. Like, I still don't. He is your third, as far as pure scoring, and, like, I don't know, I guess you would say creating. Like, he's your third option at best. Because Tobias Harris is clearly your second option. Look what he did in that first half. That's the other thing I'm worried. Like, I'm so curious how the Nets counter the Sixers matchup wise. Because who do you put on Ben Simmons? I mean, I guess that guy's going to double. But, like, who do you kind of, like? Do you put Durant on Ben Simmons? I mean, I guess that's the best matchup. If you put Durant on Ben Simmons, who guards Tobias Harris? James Harden? I mean, that's that. So as much as 100%.
That's another good point, Paul. Is whoever was defending Ben late in the game, that's not going to be the same guy. Is James Harden going to double down as effectively as who? I don't even remember. Who was it? Brown?
It was actually Johnson, the guy. And those are, like, to your point, like, those are Nick Claxton, who's 6'10", and Johnson, who's like 6'8", who plays a power game. Like, he's more of a 4 small ball 5 kind of guy. They're not going to have two of those guys in their starting lineup. It's going to be, maybe it is Durant that covers Simmons, because Durant, that would offer a lot of length in a double team. So that would probably make some sense. But then again, then you're putting, I don't know, James Harden on Tobias Harris, which doesn't seem like a favorable
You're
matchup.
also asking
and
Durant
Kyrie has to cover somebody too.
You're also asking Durant to then exert a lot of energy doubling on the defensive end of the floor.
At 100%. And that's what it is, Mike. Yes, the Sixers are going to have a difficult time matching up with those three guys, but it is not going to be a picnic on the other end for the Brooklyn Nets either. And the Sixers aren't a great offensive team. We see, like, everything bears that out. They have one great offensive player, but as a whole, their offense isn't that great. So it is going to be so interesting to see how that all plays out. And again, Mike, chemistry is such a big thing. One of the reasons the Toronto Raptors do so well against Joel Embiid is they have the guys who can do it. They have the system and the coach that can implement it, and they have that chemistry. They know where each other's going to be. They trust that help defense. I don't know that the Brooklyn Nets are going to have that and are going to be able to figure that out through 2 playoff rounds.
Now, tonight they're playing the Clippers. Do we know if the Clippers are going to be full strength tonight?
Well, we know Beverly and Ibaka, those guys have been out, so they're going to remain out. Kawhi is questionable, so we'll see what happens there. He did miss their last game. But Paul George will certainly be in the lineup. Terrence Mann, who destroyed them last time, he's going to be in the lineup. Rondo should be healthy. He's actually been giving them some pretty good minutes. I know a lot of people hated on that trade, but he's been playing pretty well for them. So, no Kawhi obviously takes a pretty good bit of luster off of the matchup. Also, the Sixers, I mean, Tobias Harris is still questionable. He's got that knee issue that's
Yeah.
still kind of bothering him. Dwight Howard as well. So I don't know that either team is actually going to be at full strength. We'll see. I mean, you want to have that because it's a good test for the Sixers, and you want to see how they handle it. But
Definitely.
it's the reality of this season, the NBA in general, and the condensed schedule that we're all dealing with this season.
Yeah, I mean, you got tonight and then next week, Golden State, Phoenix, and the 2 Milwaukee games. Those 2 Milwaukee games become interesting because if Milwaukee, and I know we'll talk deeper into these games next week, but tonight you thought, oh, man, Clippers, this is a tough schedule. Well, now this game, if they're Kawhi, but those 2 Milwaukee games, if you could get there in the same spot you're in, Milwaukee beat you twice. They're 3.5 back now. It still gives you a gap. But if you slip up in any of these games, Milwaukee's probably is they've been hanging behind this whole time, and no one seems to be paying attention to them. They got Philly twice. Those 2 games could really be the ones that we thought we were talking about with this Nets game on Wednesday night.
It's very possible. Those games could. They could be a big deal, especially, the Sixers had that game in Philly on St. Patrick's Day. They had that game in hand. They were up big, and they just kind of lost. I mean, granted, it was, a lot of factors. No Joel Embiid, second half of the back-to-back. So they just looked tired, and they kind of just ran out of gas and couldn't hold that lead. But that's a game that, that could come back to bite them down the road, especially if they don't take care of business in those games. And listen, I don't care who you are at what point. Having to win 2 games in Milwaukee, especially one, I believe the one is coming. The first game is off a back-to-back against Phoenix, I want to say. So that's brutal to have to play Phoenix and then have to go to Milwaukee. I mean, that is not an easy thing to have to do. So it's going to be tricky. And I think you have to all season, I think you just kind of have to keep things in perspective. You can't, I understand it's Philadelphia. We all kind of have that Eagles mentality where we want to react to every single game because there's only 16, but there's 72 in an NBA season. And there's just so many factors, especially this year with how weird, everything with the health and safety protocols. And when do the guys get breaks because there are so many back-to-backs and so many games in so many nights. You can't overreact to too many games, but at the same time, yes, losing both games to Milwaukee would be not very good if Milwaukee gets hot at the end and kind of sneaks up and maybe takes that 1 seed from them.
Well, right. And we talked about Wednesday. Oh, the winner has this tiebreaker and it kind of a deflating situation. But that Milwaukee one could be where this thing flips because you mentioned you got Phoenix, who's the number 2 seed out west, very good team, back-to-back with at Milwaukee. Now, the schedule does lighten up, but that could be the precursor for all 3 of those teams being really within a game of each other with the final 12 or so games to go. So it's really shaping up. It'll be interesting to see because it sounds like, anyway, the Sixers care about that number 1 seed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, neither of them made it a secret that they want the number 1 seed. And listen,
it
especially
matters.
With the way, 100%, especially with the way they play at home. With this team has been, I mean, granted, they've been significantly better on the road this year, but they've been flat out they barely ever lose at the Wells Fargo Center. And that's pretty much Embiid and Simmons' entire career. They barely ever lose at the Wells Fargo Center.
But to me, Paul, the biggest thing is the notion of to have to beat Milwaukee and then or Brooklyn and then the other team.
And that's the other big part.
To not have to go that route is significant to me, even if I'm Brooklyn.
Right. No, for sure. To have to if you're the Sixers, you don't want to pick and choose and stuff, but playing against the Miami Heat, maybe possibly in the second round, that's probably not nearly as dangerous as having to play Milwaukee in the second round. And I mean, either way, it's going to be tough because, the Heat they're a veteran team. They're a physical team. So that still would be a tough series. But between the two, of course, you'd rather play Miami and then hope that Brooklyn and the Bucks, kind of kick the crap out of each other before the Eastern Conference Finals.
And right now, you would have Atlanta or Boston. That Atlanta team's tricky right now, though. I'll tell you, they're playing a lot better. Boston's playing better. But guess what? I'll take Boston or Atlanta in the second round over one of those other 2. No question. I mean, so to me, the Sixers, getting that number 1 is imperative for them. Maybe Brooklyn says, we don't care who we play. We're just better than you. Okay, fine. That's one way to look at it.
I think it's kind of a psyche thing, too. I think just them going into the playoffs and knowing we are the number 1 seed, we are the team you have to go through. I feel like with this team, because they are young, and everyone references that from Danny Green to Doc Rivers to Dwight Howard. All these guys talk about, man, this is still a young team. The superstars of this team are still young, and we still have young players in the rotation. So I think the mental, that mental, it would just help them mentally just to know we are the number one seed. We are the team that everyone in the East has to go through. I don't think you can understate that. I think that matters.
Well, it's like the old school NBA where you had to go through the failures in each level. You got through the first round, you got knocked out. You went to the second round, you got knocked out. It feels like, the Sixers have been there, knocked out, been there, knocked out, and maybe this is the year they get over the hump and have that, get to that next plateau. We hope. We'll see. It's, by the way, Tobias, any word on him tonight?
As far as we know, still questionable. Yeah.
What was wrong with him? He's got the knee problem, but was it something that happened in a game, or this is just wear and tear over a season?
I believe it's actually something that's been lingering. It happened before the All-Star break. I can't remember the game if I'm being perfectly honest, but it happened definitely before the All-Star break, and he missed. He missed a couple games and then came back for the Utah game. And then he's been back. He missed the OKC game. So I think it's just something that's going to kind of linger a little bit here, it looks like. Hopefully he seems to think he was pretty optimistic when we talked to him post game that he thinks that just rest and some treatment can heal him and he can feel better. I know Danny Green too. He's still, I thought he was kind of moving funny at times. He's been battling a hip injury all season, according to Doc Rivers. So I think it's just wear and tear. These guys are going to be banged up, and it's just going to be the reality of the rest of the season. And I can't say enough, just the way this schedule looks and how condensed and crammed it is. It's kind of ripe for guys to get hurt, unfortunately. And it's hopefully Tobias is back because he's been so durable and reliable for them. He's a big part of this thing, and they 100% need him.
By the way, we didn't mention also where the Sixers, when they were struggling late in that game, they put the starters, not Tobias Harris, who, by the way, was having a monster game. That's the recipe for them. Embiid against the Nets. Embiid unstoppable, and Tobias having the night he had, 26. I mean, with Harris has a night like that and Embiid's unstoppable, that to me is their recipe.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact – someone could correct me if I'm wrong. I had it in the takeaways, but I think Tobias has scored over 29 times this year, and they're like 26-3 in those games or something ridiculous like that.
What's the record with the starting unit together? 20-4, something like that?
That sounds right. 20-4 sounds right. So when all five starters are playing, and I think that number even gets better. Someone pointed out when it's the five starters and Shake Milton, they've only lost like one game, I think, this year.
Yep.
So it just shows you the importance of health and how big it is to have all your pieces and to have that optionality.
I think something else to bring up too, not to make excuses. The second unit when they kind of caught that lead up, no Dwight Howard. We've seen what happens when the Sixers don't have a center to back up Joel Embiid. Not good typically, and you saw that there was just layup because no presence in there. So that was another thing the other night. No Dwight Howard.
Right, and then I think that lineup too, when it's not Ben Simmons in that lineup, when it's Tobias Harris, you get more offense because you have Tobias, but you do lose something defensively because that would be Ben, and you'd have like Mike Scott playing that five or whatever. If you're asking Tobias to kind of do what Ben Simmons does defensively, I mean you can't. I mean, flat out. Ben Simmons is arguably the best defensive player in the NBA, whereas though Tobias is much, much, much improved, just doesn't offer the same thing. So I think that kills them. But yeah, and Dwight Howard too. I think something people will be like, whatever, but energy is a real thing. And I think to your point, like when they were kind of, slacking off there in the second half, when that bench unit came out, a big part of that was Brooklyn, that second unit, when they cleared the bench out, they had so much juice and the Sixers had none. Put a guy like Dwight Howard in there to kind of spark some things up, grab some rebounds, block a couple shots, just make a couple, even if it's, he picks up a tee or something, he'll do something that's going to kind of light the team up a little bit. And I think that's something you can't understate either from Dwight Howard.
All right. Paul Hudrick's on Twitter, at Paul Hudrick for the Sixers and Clippers tonight. They have no games this weekend. They'll be back on Monday against the Golden State Warriors. Paul will be back for that. It's Golden State, Phoenix, Milwaukee next week. So a brutal stretch of games next week before the schedule kind of lightens up. I say kind of. Those Atlanta games are tough, man. That Atlanta team's fun. They're good. They have had a lot of injuries. They're getting healthy, so they're getting better. So we'll see. Paul Hudrick, have a good weekend, man.
You as well, Mike. Thanks, man.
And he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk on the Hotline. Great stuff as always.